Okay, students, so in this video I'll be showing you how to create a grid to start your pastiche drawings or paintings. Okay, so for your pastiche you're going to need to create a grid that measures 1 by 1 inches. So each square within the grid will be 1 inch on each side. And to begin that, we're going to put guidelines on the corners of our paper. So our guidelines will be 1 inch in length. So 1 inch. So this is the ruler. A ruler has two sides, the centimeter or millimeter side and the inch side. We're going to be using the inch side. And for this, to create our borders or guidelines, we're going to do it, make it 1 inch wide. So where the 0 is, you see that line there that marks the start of the first inch, and that first inch ends where the line at the next number is. So that would be 1. So we're going to line up this line at 1 with the edge of our paper. So there is the 1 right here, and I'm going to make sure that it's lined up. So when you're creating your own pastiche, ensure that you use pencil, but for this tutorial, I'll be using pen or marker so you can see it clearer. But make sure to use pencil for your own. So I'm going to place a little dot right here where the 0 is. We lined up the ruler with the 1. So now we're placing a dot where the 0 is to mark 1 inches from the edge of the paper. So from here to here will be an inch. If you're using a shorter ruler, you can go again in the set. You do this on one end of the paper, sorry. So you start at one end or corner of the paper and you do it again over the other end of the paper. Now you can turn your paper. You don't have to keep it perfectly straight. However way you can work with it best, you can turn your paper like that. So I marked there. And then if you have a shorter ruler, you can put another dot in the center or middle of the paper to mark where an inch is from the edge of the paper. So where I have these little dots, so from here at the edge to right at this dot, that's 1 inch. Now we created these dots to make sure that our guideline or border will be as straight as possible. So after I make my 1, 2, 3 lines, I'm going to take my ruler and line up those dots with the edge of the ruler. So you see the dots are touching the edge of my ruler. So then I'm going to connect them from one end of the paper to the other end of the paper. And that's our first guideline. So we created it on the long side of the paper, and now we're going to do it on the short side of the paper. It may be easier to flip your paper around like this instead of trying to do it like this. So I'll just repeat that quickly on the other side of the paper. So I line up the line where the 1 is with the edge of my paper. I place a dot at the 0. I repeat that in the center. So you line up the 1. The 1 shouldn't be over it like this or under it like this. It should line up exactly. And I place another dot at the 0, and I just repeat this to the end. So now I have 1, 2, 3 dots once more, and just like I did before, I line up my ruler so that the edge of the ruler is touching all 3 lines at the same time. So when now I follow that ruler, my line is guaranteed to be straight. So to create your grid, you need a straight and proper foundation. So now we have the borders. So we have the borders. On the image that on the painting that we will be creating a pastiche of, which I'll try and put up on the screen, you will see that it has 7 boxes going up and 5 boxes going across. So we're going to create a grid that goes 7 up and 5 across. Now how will we do that? Similar, so this section right here will be the border. So you can just use your pencil and lightly write in border to make sure you don't get confused. So then now I'm going to take my ruler, and to start the 7 boxes going up, I am going to line up the number 7 on the inch side. So you see where that line is for the 7. I'm going to line that up with this guideline or border line that we created. So I'm going to line it up on the short side of the paper. So let's just go over that. Your paper is supposed to have a long side and a short side. The 7 going up will be on the long side, and the 5 going across will be on the short side. So then, to get those 7 boxes going up, I'll line up my ruler where the 7 line is. So you see the number 7, and there's a line directly above it. I'm going to line up this line, and the line is usually longer than the others on your ruler, as you can tell. The line that marks the new inch and half inch, they are longer than all these other lines. So I'm going to line up the 7 with this border line that I created. And at every one of those long lines that a number is below, so there's another long line, and you have 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So every single line where there's a number, I'm going to place a dot, just like we did for the border. So now we have this, which would be the line, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you mark one from, you line up the 7 and you mark a dot where each number is, all the way up to 0. So just like we did for the border, I'm going to repeat that in the center and over the other side of the paper. So line it up with the 7, place a dot at each number, so that would be 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make sure your ruler is flat. 1 and 0. So I have 2 sets of dots now, and I'm going to do my 3rd set at this side of the paper. So you line it up, this bottom line with the 7 line, you place a dot at each number, going all the way up to 0. And boom, you have 1, 2, 3 sets of lines. And just like we did when we were doing the border, you're going to line up your ruler with all of the 3 dots that goes in a row. So you're supposed to have these 3 dots matching here, these 3 dots matching here, and as you go up, you create the lines to create your 7 boxes going up on your paper, not across. So I'm making sure those dots are touching the edge of my ruler. And I draw a straight line from the edge of the paper. Remember, students, I hope you're using pencil. Always use pencil for your grid. So I just repeat that going up until I'm finished with all my sets of dots. So line them up with the edge of the ruler. Draw from one end of the paper to the other. And remember, adding these dots before we draw our lines and lining up the ruler with them will ensure that our lines are straight as possible. Because for this method, you need as straight a lines as possible. There we are. So now we have, excepting the border, remember we wrote the word border here to let us differentiate. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces. So those are the 7 going up, and now we'll do the 5 going across. So you can turn your paper like this to make it a bit easier for you. So the long side would be at the bottom and the top, and the short side would be at the left and the right. So then now you can go over here in the border to create those dots so you can see them clearly. So we're going to, so we're going to line up the 5. So for this side we did 7, and for the short side we're doing 5. So let me camera focus. So I'm lining up this 5 line, so the longer line that is over the 5 on the ruler, I'm lining it up with this border that we created on the long side of the paper. So I line it up, and once again I place a dot at every number going up to 0. So then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. Then I come again in the center of the paper. And I come again in the center of the paper, line up the 5 once more with this border on the long side, and I place a dot at every number going up till we reach 0. So then once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I come over to this end of the paper, line it up with the 5, the border on the long side, line it up with the 5, and you place a dot at every number going up to 0. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. And just like we did with the other side and the border, we're going to line up our ruler with all 3 dots, making sure they're all touching the edge of the ruler. And you draw a line from one end of the paper to the other. So your line is supposed to go over those dots that you create, because we're lining them up with the edge of the ruler, and we're using the edge to draw our straight line. Pay close attention so you don't get confused with the lines with the dots that you created for the lines going across. So make sure you double check to see that your line is as straight as possible, and those dots that you made for going up this direction on the short side are straight. And there we have our grid. So now you can turn it back like this. And what we'll do now, on the border of the grid, we will put a number on each square. So starting this space, we're going to leave out. So let me put that there to symbolize that we're leaving this out. So we're going to start from here and write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, do this in pencil, students, not pen or marker. And then starting from this, in this border, at this one, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 5 across, 7 going up. And that's how you create a grid for your pastiche.